Okay, I see 9 o'clock. We can call our meeting to order. Welcome to the Iowa 911 Communications Council meeting for April 2018. We'll start with some introductions, if you want to start maybe on that end, and then we'll work through the crowd.
Officer Griffith with Urbandale Police Department representing the Iowa Peace Officers Association.
Horace Hartpence, West Des Moines GIS analyst representing IJIC.
Jack D'Angelo, Sully Telephone representing small telcos.
Rob Dennett representing the Iowa EMS Association.
Bob Seifert from Shelby County representing the Iowa Emergency Managers Association.
Rob Rotter, representing the Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association.
Sally Hall, representing Iowa APCO.
Gerard Myers, representing Iowa Department of Public Safety.
Mike Bryant, representing the Iowa Professional Firefighters.
Blake DeRucci, Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management, 911 Program Manager.
James Chambers representing CenturyLink Large Telco.
Tracy Bearden representing Iowa NENA.
Okay, do you press it or you just, there, we got green?
Martha Dykstra, Marion County Sheriff's Office.
Dwayne Voss, Raycom.
Doug Hahn, Greene County.
John Drury, CenturyLink.
Mike Myers, CenturyLink.
Amanda Roush, Story County 911.
Jim Lundstedt with Homeland Security with the Office of Emergency Communications.
Jim Wittenweiler, Department of Public Safety.
Curtis Pion with the Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Brian Midwell, Westcom.
Doug McCaslin, Warren County 911.
Crystal McIntyre, Warren County.
Chris Myers on the SWIC.
Andy Buffington, Hancock County 911.
Mike Lauer, ICN.
Tammy Rodriguez, ICN.
You'd escape. Here you go. Introductions.
Robert Bokinski, Pella Police Department.
Marcia Slycord, Pella PD.
Okay, and I think we have some guests on the phone as well.
Rebecca Barloon from the Iowa AG's office.
Denise Pavlik, Scott Emergency Communications Center, Scott County.
Tom Berger, Iowa Firefighters Association.
Cherise Bexley, Humboldt County.
Brenda Vandervoort, Fayette County 911.
Stacy Gross, Geocom.
Did we get everybody? Okay, thank you and welcome. Looking at the agenda as written here for this meeting, I think the only change we have is the Marion County request for funds has been crossed off for this fiscal year anyway. So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the agenda, sorry. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And then likewise for the March 8th minutes. Motion to approve, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Blake, can you give us your report?
Yeah, Ethan, if you could fire up that PowerPoint that's ready to go. I didn't get any feedback on my slides from last month, which means everyone must have loved it, so I did it again. The big ticket item, House File 2254, was signed by Governor Reynolds a week or two ago. That does allow us to implement our virtual consolidation plan that we've been kind of socializing and talking about now for 2 or 3 years. I'll go into detail here in some later slides, but the high-level items from that bill includes network merging of the wireline network onto the next generation wireless network and shared services. The majority of that bill is effective upon signature, so we can get working on it immediately. We don't need to wait until July. We will be scheduling some webinars in the next month or two, kind of for the formal rollout plan of what next fiscal year will look like. A lot of the slides I'll probably reuse just for information. So, but you'll still want to try to tune in if you can to those webinars. I'll certainly have more information at that time. We're still working on signing the contracts with ICN and Zetron. We got the red lines back from our AG's office, so we'll be getting those to those two vendors here shortly. So we should be able to get those contracts in place hopefully relatively soon and get moving. And just kind of the actual how do we do this, we're still working on as well. I'll show you again a couple slides and a form a little bit later on to kind of address how we're going to get the ball rolling, what the approach is for kind of the initial intake of this on this process. The other thing, hopefully this is well received, I think it will be. The bill eliminates the requirement for the Attachment C request for wireless funds. That is the one-page piece of paper that all of the 911 service boards had to submit to us annually that basically says, give us our money. So you no longer will need to do that. And again, that's effective immediately. So if you haven't submitted it for fiscal year 19, you're in luck, you don't have to. I'm going to hand out draft admin rules. These are the kind of, it's in the informal stage at this point. So we'd certainly take any feedback, formally or informally. If you look through there on the back side of page 1 is the formal public hearing information. But again, we want to be really open and transparent about this process. So if you have any informal comments, if you spot anything ahead of time, by all means get that to either John Benson or myself. Or again, you're more than welcome to show up for the public hearing as well. Like most of like the last couple of years, the admin rules for the most part mirror the changes in the code. The one thing I do want to point out is it will require a redo or a rewriting of what used to be known as the Wireless Implementation Operations Plan. We're kind of rephrasing that as the Next Gen 911 or just 911 Operations Plan. And it directs this organization, 911 stakeholders, PSAPs, to work kind of in coordination with me to get that document redrafted. So it's kind of a tentative date that's on there. You'll notice it on page 4. It's highlighted the old version at the moment. We haven't set a new date for that as it's still, like I said, in draft form. So I'll be working on that. So to kind of go over the, wake up. All right. Might have to go to the computer. There we go. So information on the network merging. We've been having basically a couple meetings a week with both ICN and Zetron so we can get this implemented as soon as possible. One thing I want to say up front, I think a month or two ago, somebody asked for the wireline specifically when we were looking at, and I said July. I'm going to walk that back as fast as I can. It won't be ready in July. We're certainly trying to get things ready as fast as we can, but it won't be July when local service boards can stop paying their bills with local telcos. So like I said, we're working with ICN and they're working with local phone companies as well as Comtech to finish and finalize the design plans. Basically what that means is PSAPs will no longer have trunks coming into their PSAPs from the phone companies. So wireline calls will go over and be received over the NextGen 911 network, just like you receive your wireless calls today. Wireline surcharge will continue to be remitted directly to the local service board. Nothing changes there. It's not coming through us first. It's going directly to the local service boards, just like it has been always. The difference is that we're the ones ultimately responsible for the costs of that connectivity. So we pay the ICN pays the connectivity for the local phone companies. So the last bullet there is basically the one item that is not effective upon signature. And that was just kind of some transitional language that we needed to stick in the bill that basically make sure everyone's aware that local service boards, local PSAPs are still responsible for those wireline circuits until we notify you that we're taking them over. So it's still local jurisdiction's responsibility until such time that the wireline traffic is actually coming over the NextGen network. One of the, as part of the informational webinars that we're going to be scheduling, I'll have both ICN and Zetron on the phone. So if there are any more technical questions about how that all works, they'll be available to answer those questions. The next item is the shared services, and I want to start specifically with the CPE, or customer premise equipment, call processing equipment, whatever you want the acronym to be. I want to reiterate, it's the PSAP's choice to opt in to that host remote CPE environment. There's zero difference with wireless surcharge if you opt in or if you opt out. The formula doesn't change at all. We don't keep any extra of your surcharge if you opt in. We don't send you any extra if you opt out. Want to hit on that PSAPs will still be able to customize the layout of the screen. I mean, of course, within the confines of what is possible. You can't make your Zetron screen look like a Viper screen, but within the confines of what Zetron can do, you can customize your screen layout and customize your one-button transfers. You'll have if you choose to opt in, your equipment for your CPE would be much smaller than you think of today, but you still have a little bit of equipment in your background. We'll cover the installation costs as well as the annual fees associated with the host and the remote CPEs. So basically, we're eliminating your costs, local costs, for anything CPE related. And I'll show you some pricing here in a little bit. The one thing that I do want to hit on, and I've mentioned it before, just want to hit on it again. We have no ability to pay for any cost of admin line integration with your CPE. So that's a local responsibility, but it's also kind of optional. If you don't want your admin lines to run through your CPE, you don't need to. But if you want to, it's an option. But that cost would be the local jurisdictions. And again, regardless of the PSAP's decision to opt in, opt out, there's no change to the current wireless surcharge formula. Oh, where's my mouse? When technology works, it's great. So we'll see if this fires up. This is not quite ready for prime time. That's why I haven't sent it out. And besides, we haven't, again, signed the contracts yet. But been working with Zetron to make sure that this is useful for them as well. But we do have a quick online form that's basically a notice of interest, gather some initial intake of information for those PSAPs, for those service boards that are interested in the shared services system. Nothing's binding at this point by filling out this form, just initial information, basically indicating your interest to us. So you can kind of see, just again, really quick form, nothing binding, to show us your interest and kind of your time frame, give us some initial information to go off of. After this, there would be a pretty formal, somewhat lengthy process that's much more formal to get all the information that's needed from your PSAP, as well as a formal user agreement that would be signed between us and the PSAP. And the reason for that service or that user agreement is basically to, if we're going to cover all these costs, we need some assurances that you're not going to ditch the system in 2 weeks the first time there's a hiccup. So not expecting any hiccups, but just want to cover ourselves since we're expending a lot of funds as well. So I don't think it's anything too scary, just trying to get everything in place. So again, the form is pretty self-explanatory, and I'll send that out when it is ready for prime time use. Yes, Rob.
Can you scroll back down where you had stopped? I think on the additional services.
Yep.
That was an interesting section there. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep. So this particular slide talks about CPE specifically, right? So the next slide gets into the additional services and functionality that is on the same notice of intake, notice of interest form. And again, nothing's binding at this point, and I'm going to show some pricing here in a second. But it basically, again, gets the ball rolling. If you are interested in cost sharing some of this additional functionality with us, this would be the place where you could indicate that to us. So with that excellent transition, so if a PSAP opts into the CPE environment, we can be done right there. But if you are interested in additional features, additional services, we would cost share those items with local service boards. You can opt into the CPE and tell me to get lost on everything else. You can opt into the CPE and go forward with the rest of the services and functionality that you see there as well. So I've mentioned before the cost share. Basically, the amount of variables that start to enter into the equation on what we can afford at this point gets a little bit challenging. We can kind of forecast the wire line conversion is pretty easy. That's cut and dry pricing. The pricing itself on the shared services is cut and dry, but the amount of people opting in to this CPE is a variable at this point, as is the amount of people opting into the additional functionality and services. So at least for year one, what we're going with is we will cover the installation costs of these additional items. The local service board or PSAP would be responsible for the annual recurring costs. Again, that's year one. I'd love to say that that's going to be the way it's going to be for 5 years. I'll be pretty happy in my math if that works for 5 years. But again, that's kind of what we're going with for the first year. So the pricing. Along the left-hand side is the number of seats at your PSAP. That is how the pricing is done. The first two columns represent the CPE costs. Again, it's good information for, I like all your phones taking pictures. The first two columns there for the CPE, it's good information for everyone, but really those are our costs. So you're happy to look, but I wouldn't worry about those first two columns. The additional columns, the CAD, the logging, recorder, the mapping, the emergency medical dispatch, if you look at the non-recurring costs, that would be our costs. The annual costs would be the local jurisdiction. Again, based on the number of seats at the PSAP.
Blake, you've mentioned the a la carte sort of choosing.
Yep.
I haven't heard if you don't choose CPE, can you choose some of these others?
For us to cost share, CPE gets you into the door. That's your ticket to the dance. Zetron has stated they will allow local service boards this pricing in and of itself, but that's no cost share with us.
Okay.
Will there be other CAD features, or is it a standard CAD?
It's the Zetron CAD.
I don't know that much about it. Is it customizable to an individual?
You know, and that's a really good question. They did a presentation back in November at the council meeting. It's still online. I'd either have to, I don't want to talk technologically about their service. So either go back and watch that, or with the upcoming webinars, feel free to ask them any questions you want.
Couple other things. The logging recorder, you know, right now we record not only our 911 lines, but admin lines. Is that going to be available to us through this?
I believe if you pipe your admin lines through the CPE, it would be. Their concept for the logging recorder right now is that it would be a backup because everyone has a logging recorder. That being said, the first time somebody approaches me and says they need a new logging recorder, I'm certainly going to bring it up that it could be used as a primary. But at the moment, again, because everyone has a logging recorder, it would just be for backup purposes only.
Okay, and then I assume this logging recorder would do our radio as well?
I haven't had that conversation about integrating with the outbound traffic.
The other question I'd have is the emergency medical dispatch, power phone. Is that integrated along with law enforcement?
So the emergency medical dispatch currently is through PowerPhone. Just to be totally honest, we've asked the question if Priority Dispatch, ProQA could be included as well, and they're looking into it. I have nothing formal to announce. I haven't seen any pricing, but we'd like to be able to make both of those offerings. The difference, PowerPhone, the training is online. The training is included in that price at 5 dispatchers per seat. And that is the Cadillac version, if you will, of PowerPhone. It integrates into your CAD.
Final question?
Yeah.
My light's a little slow for once. Never mind. Line cuts. We're getting into the construction season again. Many of us have relationships established with the local phone companies so that we have line cuts. We get a prompt notification and can make alternative routing arrangements when they're necessary. How's that going to change?
You want to handle this at all, Mike?
Mike Lauer, ICN. So let me think if I understand your question correctly. Line cuts from talking camera trunk or call routing on the local PSAP. So things that would be coming into the local PSAP, correct? Calls that would be routed into the local PSAP. Is that the?
Well, correct. And then anywhere along the line, anytime there's a line cut, you know, the services that are disrupted are dependent on where that cut is.
Correct. So within anything when ICN takes over the transport aspect of 911 aggregation, what will end up happening is how we do it now with 911, next gen 911, there is going to be notification to TCS Comtech from there because we're the transport provider, and the TCS Comtech and also the PSAP gets notified with that. They will be notified of any of those service cuts and then any routing plans that happen from there, just like they do on 911, wireless 911.
So basically anything, once ICN gets it on, is like a wireless cut today. It gets automatically rerouted to your pre-identified PSAP. Any cut from the phone company before it gets to the ICN is also still how it's going to be today. I imagine you're going to get notified, you're going to let...
ICN gets notified, we notify Comtech, TCS, and the local PSAP as well. And we will be working with the local telephone provider because they still are that trunk from the local areas to get the Comtech, TCS for the routing.
And obviously, it'll be a work in progress, but we always have concerns when we have cuts and we may isolate an exchange or a community and getting information to them in a timely fashion. I would hope that as we go forward, we see that happen.
Yeah, that is a very big concern of us, and it's something where we are open towards any suggestions that makes it easier towards notifications on that. So we obviously have our ways, done this for a while, but we will do what we need to do to make it easier for the local guys to know. So, and just so you guys know, the plan is to have, I talked with a local provider up in Northwest Iowa yesterday, and the plan is to have redundancy met at multiple locations as much as possible, so that those line cuts, if they're geodiverse within a region from a central office, you should have minimal times, or it'd be the perfect storm if, you know, something got cut in, say, Sioux Center and then Lamar's. So that's that is the design and the intent of the network. So that is what we're pushing forward on this. Hopefully we don't have too many of those issues. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, can we go back to the slides? Come on, don't make me get up. There we go. All right, so additional legislative information. Again, just a reminder to look for those webinars coming up. Great chance to ask some of the technical questions that I know will come as we get further down the road, and as you start thinking of this more as a reality that it's going to become. Another item that we had to be really careful about with the effective upon signature clause was the $7 million cap and our ability to pass that through at the end of the current fiscal year. We made sure that that was also exempt. So what that really means is we will still pass that $7 million through equally to all the PSAPs at the end of the fiscal year. Again, that was $7 million that was allotted for physical consolidation. Nobody took physical consolidation grants. So what the next part of the code section, as far as what we're supposed to do with that $7 million, is to split it up equally amongst the PSAPs and send that to local service boards. So again, look for that around July and August. The $200,000 match incentive still is in place for those who do wish to physically consolidate in future years. The good part about this is that there will be no longer a cap, which kind of frees up that grant to cross fiscal year boundaries. We don't have to worry about, making sure it's all spent before the end of a fiscal year. So you can take as long as you need for the natural lifespan of that project to come to a conclusion. So if you are interested in physically consolidating with your neighbor, that grant remains available. It'll start back up again in July. There won't be any deadlines. We won't cut it off in December, and you can take however long you need to make that happen. And also then in the future, because there is no cap, again, what remains in the code section, once you remove the cap language, is all remaining funds are zeroed out at the end of the fiscal year. Whatever's remaining in the surplus gets zeroed out and sent to the PSAPs equally again. The GIS grants remain available both for the current year, which we'll approve some here in a second, and then again into the future. Any other questions on legislation before I move on?
Blake, the amount of money we're going to get this year, can you clarify how that's going to go forward? We're getting about $63,000 this year.
Right. So basically, the $100,000 for council travel, public education, and training is part of that $7 million. So if you take $6.9 million divided by 113, you'll have an idea of how much we will pass through to each PSAP. So this year, we're legislatively told how much that amount is. It was $7 million. Next year, at the end of the fiscal year, whatever we haven't spent on merging the wireline and wireless network, whatever we haven't spent on shared services, whatever that dollar amount is, whatever is left in the operating surplus would get divided up by 113 or however many PSAPs there are at the time, and again, sent out to the local service boards. Again, that starts to enter into that. There's a lot of variables to know how much is going to be there at the end of next fiscal year. It does depend on how many people are going to opt into the shared services, how many people were able to turn up in that particular fiscal year. So I don't even want to throw out a number, really. But whatever is there will be sent out.
I think the point is the number that you would throw out would be substantially less under any of those scenarios than the 63,000 that we're getting this year. I think that needs to be understood by all the PSAPs out there.
And
we are not going to see that money on a regular basis.
And I think our thought process all along has been if we out of the network cost portion can spend $1, we're saving local jurisdictions $1.50. You know, we're taking expenses away from, you no longer have to pay for CPE, you no longer have to pay for wireline. So that's kind of the offsetting difference that we've talked about. But you are right. All right. You can kind of see, I want to reiterate, this program for public education and training has been around for 3 years now. I think most of the people here get it, at least on the council. But if there's anyone, unaware, that is money that local PSAPs, local service boards can access, especially on the public education and the training side. And you can kind of see there what we've funded in the past. Go to the next slide. There's about $21,000 remaining that can be spent prior to the end of June. I know some of that will be taken up with some council travel, but again, there's funding remaining. If anyone can pull together a training session prior to the end of the fiscal year. So again, that's where we stand with that fund. And then the bottom bullet there is just kind of a heads up. Everything else we put into forms. We've put the consolidation application into a Google form. We've put the GIS grant application into a Google form. We're putting the notice of interest into a Google form. So most likely, just to make everything the same, make one-stop shop, look for this application for training to be that form as well. But it'll be really familiar, be really simple, just a couple clicks and away you go. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Blake. That moves us on to the PSAP GIS grant application approvals. We have applications from Henry, Johnson, Pottawatomie, Scott, Woodbury, and Wright counties. Is there anyone on the board that has to abstain from any of these? I don't think so. Okay. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Are there any questions or comments about any of them? Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion then to approve those grant applications as a whole. We have a motion. We have a second. Very well. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. And we've eliminated the Marion County request, so anything from technical advisory, either from the board, anything out in the crowd here? Okay. Chris Myers, could you give your report, please?
Thank you. I will make this as brief as I can, as I know you guys have a packed agenda today. We are working on getting the network rolled out, and as towers start coming online, coverage testing comes to mind for the E6 network. If you want to help with the coverage testing and see what the network looks like for yourself, let me know, and I can get you some specifics on that. Another set of standards have been passed for ISIX and are on the ISIX-B website for review. Those were from the board meeting last month, and another set of standards is set to be up for debate and hopefully approval this month. We also have another standards meeting that is set for April 17th. The location on that, I think, is at Westcom. Is that right, Rob? I think, maybe. It's changed a couple of times, but if you want clarification on that, I can get you those as well. And if it's not at Westcom, Rob, I apologize. I thought that's what it was, but I might be mistaken too. I'm working on lining up some more stakeholder meetings with local agencies to get insights on interoperability needs and concerns. The weather sort of precluded some travel, or at least made it very difficult for a while, so I'm working on getting that fired back up. Also of note, the next COMEX is scheduled for April 23rd and April 24th. It is a severe weather event, a pretty big one. If you remember the June 1998 derecho, it will cover that and the associated fallout from that. OEC also lastly has an excellent article that was released, I think it was last week, on how to survive the social media information flood that can come during events. It has some unique case studies to pass along with suggested best practices. If you'd like a copy of that, please let Jim Lundstedt or myself know. I'm happy to pass it on. With that, I can take any questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, next we'd like to hear from the Office of Emergency Communications, Jim Lundstedt.
Good morning. Happy National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. I haven't heard that mentioned yet. I would have brought donuts, but I didn't have a good head count. And of course, Hertz Donuts wanted to sell me the whole shop, exceeded my budget. But nonetheless, I want to first say, as a former public safety telecommunicator, they are the unsung heroes of this business. Two quick things for you at the SXB meeting today. I will present a series of briefing slides on work that we are doing to evolve the NIMS communications unit into a communications section. All those pre-decisional, and some of the comments will be notional if you have an interest in that area. That will be covered as part of the ISIX briefing today. Finally, and it's a tired message, but I want to reemphasize recent intelligence suggests a concerted uptick in the number of ransomware incidents. Both the FBI and DHS are continuing to make outreach on this and to reemphasize we've done a good job of trying to inoculate ourselves from the random USB stick in the PSAP that brings you all kinds of creative things, intentional or unintentional. But the number one delivery mechanism that we're observing is phishing, spelled with a PH, and spear phishing, where you get that creative little message that has your name and talks about your work area and perhaps appears to originate from somebody that you know. If you read the news, you know that we have had significant public safety impacts with malware and ransomware in the last month. I would encourage you, if you're not already having this conversation with your IT professionals in your city or county, understand how you are isolated or are not isolated or virtualized to be protected from a mistake in another department. In this region, we actually had a county that suffered a pretty major outage as a result of a malware attack that occurred in a public works department. Nothing against public works. They need email, they need access to IT resources, but those have to be isolated, firewalled, virtualized, protected from the dispatch center, CAD, and GIS resources in order for us to do our job. Can't go into much more detail than that other than to tell you we are observing a lot of activity in this area. The attacks are becoming much more significant. Read up on Atlanta. If you'd like to go a little deeper into San and some of those kind of things, I'll be happy to have that conversation with you. With that, I stand for any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
Jim, the media indicates some people are paying when they're being held at ransom. Are they?
Don't expect good outcomes from paying ransom. Ask any LE. The simple fact is, if you step up and pay ransom, expect the next one to be fairly significant and soon thereafter. It's a sad reality that once your data is hacked, there's some pretty good best practices, including have a backup plan, a backup data center, backup PCs, and a restoration methodology. I'll give you one quick litany. One county in this region that was in the process of a CAD conversion was hit by a ransomware attack. And although it did not affect the PSAP, The vendor was on site to provide support for this conversion, and all of the IT resources in that county were diverted, basically, and they had to send that vendor home. That's still an expensive adventure in ransomware, and it really didn't touch the PSAP. It just touched the people who support the PSAP. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. All right, any legislative issues? Mike? Nothing? Okay. All right, any new items for discussion? All right, that brings us to our unfinished business, a continuation of the discussion we had last time regarding the certain public hospitals as standalone political subdivisions and thus earning a vote on local 911 service boards. And we were, as you recall, asked to give an opinion to Department of Homeland Security. I'll just cut to the chase, Rob. I think you have a motion that you were interested in making. Would you like to discuss that?
Yeah. I think my thought would be to get this motion out there, see if there's a second, and then have discussion about it. Seem reasonable?
Absolutely.
Sally, are you ready? I'll send this to you too. A motion to recommend to the 911 program manager that number one, that county hospitals organized under Iowa Code Chapter 347 that provide ambulance services be eligible for county 911 service board membership under Iowa Code Chapter 34A. And number two, that actual local 911 service board membership shall be a local determination based upon their service board plan consistent with Iowa Code Chapter 34A. Y'all get that?
Is there any discussion about that? Right. Anybody wishing to offer a second? Okay. Sorry, who was the second? Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Oh, wait, we have some discussion.
Just a little slow.
Okay.
I appreciate the motion. I'm just a little concerned. This is a section of Iowa Code 34A that's been in existence since Iowa 34A came into existence. And, you know, I just have a concern that this part of the code's been discussed many times. And it's a dirty piece of the code. It's not very clear. It's been reinterpreted many times in many different ways. We've seen our 911 service board membership change as a result of different interpretations at different times by different AG, by different personnel in the AG's office, or even different interpretations from personnel in Homeland Security. I guess I would encourage the council, regardless of the action that's taken today, to look at that piece of Iowa code and clean up the language so that it really reflects the users of 911 in our counties, and that some of the counties' 911 service boards today actually have entities that vote outside of their counties, and they can have the potential to outvote the services and the providers within those counties. And that's just wrong. So whether we add hospitals to this or whether we don't is not as material as cleaning up that entire section of code.
I agree completely. I think this is just one more instance where we're reminded how much that code section needs some attention. I think here in the coming weeks and months, we should probably be looking at things that we could recommend as a council to fix some of those issues. But like you, it really doesn't change anything. I think it's encouraging that you have somebody who wants to take part in a local service board. our problem, and I think a lot of problems in other service boards, are that we have people that are on the board that don't take part in the board, and it makes our meetings very difficult. And then again, when you have somebody who has representation into another county that really doesn't have a lot of services but still has that power over it is troubling. So it just shines a light on the issue of 34A, and so I think it's good that we're reminded once again, and maybe as a council we can address that going forward. But back to our motion, is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I did reach out to most of the leadership in the Iowa APCO chapter, and speaking with the president. Can you hear me now? Okay. I did reach out to some of the leadership of the Iowa APCO chapter, and speaking with the president of APCO, his suggestion was that we table this matter. It has raised a lot more questions than actually answering any questions, and he would like to put it out to the full membership of Iowa APCO, and that would be at the fall meeting, but to try to get some clarification of, because even at our last meeting, we talked about may, shall, entitled, those sort of things, where there seems to be some controversy on how things are worded in Chapter 34A versus, the administrative rules, that I think it needs to really be set down and kind of torn apart before we actually, do something else that could make this even more convoluted.
I think we need to remember that this is a recommendation to Iowa Homeland Security. We're not the ones who make the actual decision. But if there is questions about whether the viewpoint and the interpretation of the intent of the Iowa 34A of the Iowa Code has changed, then the AG representative last meeting indicated we could ask for a formal opinion. So that can be requested from anybody. So if there are concerns, then I challenge and recommend that you ask for that. So if you feel that it's not the intent, and let's get the experts' opinions. Instead of just tabling this, let's make some action to move forward instead of just standing still and waiting. But I do recommend also and agree with that we should clean up 34A. I think this is a good chance. It's offering insight that there are some changes that need to be made. I am for this, but if individuals want to table it, I think we should take action instead of just tabling it. I think we should ask for a formal opinion from the Attorney General.
Blake, are you aware of the timeline that this, obviously they're asking us for an opinion. Are they looking to be making a decision in the next 30 days?
Yeah, I don't know that there's, a cut and dry timeline. The folks that raised this issue to me probably start talking to me about it, almost a year ago. And just as conversations tend to go over email, it would come up again every once in a while. I know the AG's office has had it for a little while. And again, to kind of reiterate, kind of came back as, probably it's supportable from their office either way. What's the policy that we want to make going forward with it? So, and I know Rebecca from the AG's office, I thought I heard her on the call earlier. I don't know if she's still on the line, but I don't know if she has anything else to add from listening to the discussion today as well as last month.
Yeah, this is Rebecca. I'm on the phone. I agree with everything Blake just said. And the general discussion on 34A3 being confusing, and then coupled with the administrative rules, which more or less mirror, but add a little bit more clarification on the definition of political subdivision. I think it could be clearer, but like Blake mentioned, I think it is supportable and encouraging that these hospitals want to be on it from maybe a policy standpoint. But other than that, I think clarifying the actual code would probably be in the best interest moving forward, just so when these kind of questions come up, it's a little more clear what the answer is. I'm sorry, was that a question? I couldn't hear that.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
This is Sharice Sexy. Are we allowed, as Colin, to participate in the conversation?
I don't think we'd be opposed at hearing your opinion.
Well, okay, this is Sharice Sexy from Humboldt County, and I'm one of the people who had brought this to Blake's attention. And I just want to point out that the Attorney General has very consistently offered opinions that EMS should have a vote and that everything about it spins on whether or not that entity is public or private. So I don't think that there's ever been any inconsistency in that, and I think that's well documented in the Attorney General opinion. I think Blake sent you the 1990 opinion last month. And I think the fact that 347 hospitals are requesting this, I think that is new information. And I guess I would ask you to not table this, to make a decision or make a recommendation. This has been an issue that's been ongoing for 30 years, and I'd like to see it resolved. And I guess I would also like to ask you to apply that same logic and reasoning for that 1990 opinion regarding benefited fire districts, to apply that same reasoning to EMS. I think you could look at that opinion and you could replace the word fire with EMS or with Humboldt Hospital or Crawford County Hospital or anything else. And it should apply.
Okay, thank you.
This is Brad Bonner. If I can give my opinion too, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly.
So I'm general counsel for the Crawford County Memorial Hospital, and to be honest with you, when this issue came up, I thought it was going to be a simple answer because 347 hospitals often get confused as just being a part of the county, since county is in our name. And so normally in my normal job, it comes up quite often that I have to clarify that we are a separate entity, that we have a democratic board, that it's democratically elected. Iowa Code 347.73 actually gives the board, the trustees, specific authority to levy a 27-cent tax to support an ambulance. 347.14 specifically, Section 8, the powers of the board give them the authority to purchase, maintain, operate an ambulance. So as I watched your last meeting and as I see this, it is an interesting question that legislatively I think you do need to look at and fix, because if you just kind of flow chart out the membership on the boards, right now we're classified as a private entity, which would not be correct. We are a public organization. We're subject to 21, 22, the public bidding laws of 26. So we are firmly a governmental entity. We derive our own tax asking. And part of why this came up is we're actually doing a larger communication study. In our call volumes are 10,000 calls for police, and then EMS is 2,000 to 3,000 calls, and then fire is a couple hundred. But if you look up the makeup of this board, I think there's 13 members on our local board, and probably 10 of them are fire departments. So it's an interesting question, and I don't, I'm not advocating for one position or another more than anything. I just wanted to clarify that, under 347.7, we do levy our own tax, and so it would be different than, I think from the last meeting, a school hiring a safety officer. They don't have a specific tax for that actual entity. So I don't envy you for trying to find a resolve, but I did want to present that we are definitely governmental bodies under 21 and 22, and I don't believe under the definition of subdivision that we are anything but a standalone entity as we are now.
So you're just saying, this is Rebecca, so you're just saying you meet the definition of political subdivision as it's used in 34A and defined at the administrative role. Is that right, Brad? Okay.
That would be
just
my
to clarify
position.
for the council. Yep, thank you.
I could see that if we were deriving our funding for our ambulance from the county supervisors under that political subdivision rule, the county already has a seat at the table, and so we would be excluded. But because we have our own levy, we would be a political subdivision.
Okay. Anything else? I'll give my humble opinion. I think, again, I'll reiterate that we shine a light on the fact that 34A is messy. But I think under the code, it's my opinion that these hospitals do qualify. And I would feel a little bad if we were holding these entities that want to take part in a service board hostage while we tried to fix a problem that's been there for many, many years. And so that would be my opinion, that I think what I don't want to see happen is that we take action today and then we put it back in the drawer and then we don't deal with it again until the next problem. I think it's really got to be a priority of something that we take care of.
Yeah, and I concur. I mean, we are asked for our assessment, our analysis of what the code states. The code, based on what it's written, whether or not it needs fixed or not and improved in the wording, does support this. And I think we'd be in the wrong to say, let's table it if it is supportive under the code. The Attorney General says it's supported based on past opinions, and she said it mirrors that old opinion with fire, and traditionally they're not giving new opinions based on if it's inferable and can be looked at under the same lens. So I believe we should support this motion and not table it. We can fix the language and go back and assess, but as it's written now, the code does support it.
Yes.
Does work. So, being new to this board, I'm just curious, how would we go about fixing the code? Do we set up a subcommittee that looks at it, tries to figure out better wording and submits that as a recommendation to Homeland Security, or how does that work?
That would be my preference, that we would put together a committee to work on this specifically. And that's something that the board would have to decide and, have a motion and work. And maybe that's something for our next meeting to get that on the agenda. I think that's the most logical approach.
Could we set up, I know we're in the middle of a motion, but after this is done, could we do another motion to bring something for the next meeting?
I think that'd be appropriate. Anything further? Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. So are you looking at making a motion then to set up a committee to look at 34A specifically? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to offer solutions to the legislator to fix 34A?
Yeah, I think that word's a pretty good. I just want to move to set up a committee to bring forth recommendations to our next meeting on how we should reword 34A.
We'll have to have membership for that. So I'm assuming that there might be people on this board that would be willing to take part in something like that.
I will. For Tracy Beard and for Iowa Nina.
Okay. How many can we have on a committee? Whatever we choose. Okay. Well, I think it'd be nice if it was, maybe 3 or 4 people at least. Rob, you did such a great job writing this motion. Okay, so we have Rob. Anybody else?
Should we finish his motion and get it approved?
Yeah, good point.
I'll second his motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to set up this committee and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, motion carries. So we have 2 members. Anybody else?
And of course, we're gonna have Blake on our committee, so.
Blake, can you? Sorry, was there somebody on the line there?
Yeah, Rob, this is Tom Berger. I will be willing to be on the committee if you need another.
And I can take lead and schedule a meeting and get this going before our next council meeting.
Okay. Very good. Anybody else who's dying to be on a committee?
If you take people from the floor, Green County would be.
I'm sorry?
If you take people from the floor, I would be interested in that.
I don't think it matters who's on the committee. That'd be fine. If you want to make sure that you leave your contact information with us before you leave.
This is Cherie Sexy. I would like to be on that committee if you're taking membership from the floor.
Okay, I'm sorry, what was the name?
Cherie Sexy.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Very good. Do we have any travel requests? Okay, I don't think so. Any further business from the floor? Right. Basically takes care of the list of items on our agenda. Anybody else have anything else, or do we get a motion to adjourn? Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I'm just really glad that we found something legislatively for next year. I was really looking forward to ending this with a really good session this year where there wasn't any controversy and having a year with none. But I'm really excited now to charge back up to the hill.
We want to put you to work.
Awesome. And you're just the man for it. You know? All right. Anything else? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.